Hello everybody, Adam Steele from Hot Pole Studios here, and we are here for another day at the British Boutique Guitar Festival. I had to look at the sign to remember the words because I'm very tired. With me is Rob Dix from RD Amplification.
Hi.
Hi! And Rob makes these incredible amps that I now know are incredible because I've just heard Henning play it. The Dualist, and many, many different iterations of.
Yes, pretty much, yeah.
Yes. So it's not your granddad's amp, is it? It's certainly not what this shape of amp would suggest as the kind of the Fender combo.
No, I mean, like a lot of those early amps, like, you know, the Boogies and stuff like that, that they kind of came out of the Fender stable because that's, you know, that's what was around then. So they were all hot rodded, same way that we hot rodded Marshalls in this country. It just happens to look a bit American, probably because of the knobs, to be quite frank. That was just the choice of knobs that, you know,
that suited this
that's what they chose to go on it. So this was actually built as a prototype amp for Renegade Guitar Company.
Right,
so
good stuff.
That was the cosmetics they kind of looked at. They wanted.
Well, there's one behind me as well on the other camera. You can see it on camera too. And it's this is something that's a little bit unusual. It's a head and cab, but in the head is an 8-inch speaker, which is connected when the cab isn't, which is, I think, is brilliant for two reasons. Firstly, it means you can't accidentally blow up the head by not having the cab connected, which I may have done once or twice. It cannot be verified. It may have happened. And that means that you can take the head home, leave the cab at the practice room, and it will give you your tone to work with, which is really good. And you've been experimenting with new speakers on that.
Yeah, so that whole 8-inch driver in the head thing came out as a bit of an experiment, really, because it's got tube reverb. You'll know that tube reverb trays are particularly sensitive to transformers, the same as single coil pickups are. So inevitably, a head needs to be at a reasonable depth to accommodate that.
To get it away.
So the thought was, somebody said, well, you know, you've got that size head, wouldn't it be quite cute if we could put a speaker in it just for practice? And I thought, well, okay, let's give that a go.
Yes.
So I've been through that loop, trying a number of different speakers, and I've settled on a couple that I think kind of sound grown up in a small environment. And that particular head now has got a brand new speaker in it, which I'm just trying out, which is the Celestion TF0818. Which is actually a PA driver, bass mid-range PA driver, but I've picked up on Tinternet that a lot of people are trying them as swap outs for your typical 8-inch combo type amps, and it makes it sound quite grown up and big, and doesn't fall apart like a lot of speakers of that size might do. So I'm trying that to see how that performs.
Good stuff. I mean, I want to try that at some point, just because the old meme that you see of people putting a mic on the Marshall head and the sound guy gets fired. In this case, the sound guy might not get fired.
Yeah, so I mean, my own personal rig, similar sort of setup, a head with an 8-inch in it. That one happens to have an Eminence 820 amp cone driver in it, which is my favourite that I've tried so far. And I do that quite often. I'll go around to my mates and we're just going to jam for a couple of hours. I won't bother taking the speaker cab, I'll just take the head.
Really handy.
Yeah. So you clearly don't have the same, you know, breadth of tonalities you would have a big cab, but it's enough to get you a decent sound at a reasonable level.
Absolutely. I mean, these amps as well, the Dualist, the name, correct me if I'm wrong, but it comes from the fact that there are two kind of modes to it.
Yeah.
So it's got not really gain and lots of gain.
Yeah, so it's a two-staged cascaded circuit essentially. In single mode, you've got a single 12AX7 or equivalent triode tube running as pretty much a normal single channel amp would operate, you know, with a tone stack in between and going into the effects, tube effects loop and the reverb and the output stage. And in dual mode, you've got two 12AX7s cascaded into each other. And you've also got additionally then gain 2, a level control to balance the volume when you switch between them, and an additional filter control which just rolls off a little bit top end if you want.
Right, so we'll talk about the filter at the end because that's the unusual control. But let's start by listening to the single mode. This is one of the Munson Guitars offset guitars. This is Was it the Marauder, Henning?
Yes.
It was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a British World War II plane.
Marauder.
Don't mention the war. That's with the middle taken out quite a bit and with the bass up a little high. But, I mean, it's partly speaker dependent, partly combo dependent. But that voice is still quite rich and full. And there are a few different modes. There's a fat mode and a...
Yeah, so in both modes, both single and dual mode, you've got access to a bright switch on the volume, which is pretty standard already.
Okay. Let's hear that.
One more. Yeah, so that's just a passive bleed over on treble bleed over on, you know, as you'd have in a typical Fender Twin or something like that.
Makes the difference for those sparkly tones.
Yeah, it's also got a fat switch which is on a pull quad there.
Right, so that gives us... Oh, that's a real low mid kind of kick.
Yeah, so that's quite useful for like if you've got, you know, a front end Strat single coil pup.
Yeah.
Making it sound something a bit more towards a humbucker or...
Yeah, sitting it in the band a bit better, yeah.
Just to fruit it up a little bit.
Well, even on humbuckers, that will instantly put me further forward. And then without. Yeah, so it is kind of what I would describe as a cleaner EQ. Not in terms of drive, but in terms of kind of... That low mid is, depending on the genre you play in, it can be your enemy or it could be exactly what you need.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I put it in there essentially to, you know, maybe if somebody's got a thin sounding single coil, you want to fatten it up a bit.
But if I was on single coil here. On humbucker, it's a different story. And this is with a lovely, washy, long reverb. That is very, very nice. That's the kind of reverb I could sit with, and I'm not usually a reverb fan.
The reverb has been interesting. I've used an extra long delay tray, but I've made the circuit mix a bit weaker.
Okay.
So that although it's a big long delay, it tends to hang around in the background a bit like a delay would.
Right.
Rather than just completely swamp your chord tone.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when we kick in mode 2.
Yeah, so we're going to essentially what we're going to call the overdrive mode.
Right.
We've also got a foot switchable boost on that.
Oh wow. You know what I'm playing just for Henning?
But you fucked it up!
Probably.
Did Gary Moore have a stroke?
I likely had a
You are
stroke.
horrible people!
That sings at me. That.
There's also a gain trim on the back,
Right.
which it tailors the amount of signal going from the first stage into the overdrive stage.
Right.
So if you want to use it for a sort of bluesy rock thing, you can keep the gain trimmed down a bit,
Okay.
which would get you, normal sort of overdrive modes, or you can actually increase the size of the signal going into it. So it's on about halfway up at the moment.
Okay. So I'll go back to where I was.
Turn it down a bit. That's about a quarter of the way up.
Right, so then I can be a bit more dynamic with my right hand. I did notice when that gain trim was quite a lot higher up that we didn't get any offensive background noise or excessive amounts of hiss, which is really good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit obsessive about noise. There's a lot of attention to detail that you can't see in the wiring layout and component layout, and keeping sensitive components away from other components that might cause you a problem. So I try and make a bit of an effort to not have too much rubbishy noise.
That's fantastic for me, because that attention to detail is what separates guys like yourselves from companies who just churn out stuff that works, but when you really start listening, you start running into those problems of hiss and buzz and hum and.
I learnt most of that stuff from an old lecturer at college who used to build hi-fi valve amps.
Right.
So I basically cribbed his particular techniques for creating hi-fi amps that were quiet, essentially. I mean, obviously, clearly, not as much gain as you're going to have there, but
Sure.
But the same principles of the same. If you apply those principles, you can kind of make an amp that hopefully isn't too noisy.
Good stuff.
Other than what you want.
We've still got gain 2 on, and we're talking over it without it hissing at all. That is really quite something for almost any high gain amp that I've used. Even with the Master, not particularly high, because we're using this in Mike's room here, and we would die of over volumeness.
Yeah.
That's a thing. If it was any higher, but even so, most of the amps I've used that I would consider high gain amps, it sounds like a snowstorm when you're not playing, and
That annoys me intensely.
yes, I would be so happy without a noise gate. I can tell you that.
Yeah. No, I try and spend a lot of time. Well, I've nailed it now, I think. So I've spent the time, and I repeat the process each time we do a build. So
Amazing.
hopefully, apart from the odd gremlin, you should get the same results each time.
Good stuff. Speaking of how loud it can go, these are designed each time completely differently, power stage wise, right?
Yeah. So essentially, I adopted the sort of boogie type approach in that you design something that works, and if you can make it better, but if you can't make it better, then just go with that and apply to different sort of scenarios. So essentially, it's the same core circuit structure. And I just customize the output stages according to people's requirements. Anything from a couple of watts, studio amp, through to occasionally 100 watt, but I try and get people to avoid that if at all possible. And predominantly, maybe 80% of the amps I build are around about sort of 15 to 20 watt kind of band. This one is particularly loud. It was built for a purpose on spec, so that's essentially going to be like a 30 watt amp. But yeah, so I customize the output stage to suit what people want, really. And that one there is a single-ended Class A output stage, which will get you about 10 watts clean, 15 watts saturated.
A lot more than you think it is.
which is still quite loud, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, once you start getting above the clean territory, with any nicely designed single-ended power stage, you get more character, don't you? And of course, the choice of valve is entirely on the customer.
Yeah, I mean,
With recommendation.
I can steer people. I prefer cathode bias output stages because they have a musicality to them compared to standard grid bias. For those of people who know that stuff, that's my personal opinion. Having the extra components in a cathode bias stage just gives you an extra kind of musical flavour that isn't there with fixed bias. So you typically, on any tube pair, what you might consider a 40-watt type Fender output stage at 40 watts, if you cathode bias that you're going to lose about a third of that power in wattage.
Right.
And that would be the same across most tubes. So, but I think the loss of that third of power is well worth the musicality you get as a result.
Yeah, well, if it sounds louder than the wattage rating should be, if you know what I mean, then it kind of makes up for itself in a way.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
So it's
a tweed style output stage,
right,
which has very limited, if no, negative feedback. So that makes it very responsive, dynamic. So it's going to punch more air out.
Yeah,
which is why typically the AC30 is always seen as a very loud amp, even though it's only 30 watts, because it has a similar kind of output stage with no negative feedback. So the speaker is, when you hit the string, the speaker does poof, that.
Yeah.
And that is, in perception terms, what you see as loudness, because you're moving air, basically.
Good stuff. And then, of course, it's down to speakers again, which are choice of... again, I know that you make recommendations, but if someone has something that they're like, I really like this, that also...
Yeah, I mean, I tend to sort of... I've been through so many different types of builds with different speakers now. I tend to know the ones that I probably don't favour. The rest of them are down to personal choice and application and what kind of response you want out of it. So I tend to sort of do a build as a bit of an educational process, so that if somebody doesn't actually know what speaker they want, I'll say, well, okay, we'll have a look at speaker A, B, C, and D, on YouTube, and just have a listen to see what you like, and then get back to me and we can discuss, whether your preference is going to work well or maybe not. That's the way it works.
Fair enough. So, last thing to talk about on this, of course, is the brass tacks. If someone calls you up and said, yes, Rob, I want this, what kind of rough price are we talking about?
So essentially I tend to price up without the cost of the speaker, so that people can spend 50 quid on a speaker or 200 if they want to. So a head version of this without the speaker is 2,200. A combo version like that is a bit extra for the cabinet, so 2,300 plus the price of the speaker, whichever one you want to put in it. Or if you've got your favourite speakers at home that you've taken out of something, you can just send them to me and I can put them in.
That is a lot of money, but so are most top of the range amps, and I think that is comfortably in that range, if not actually near the top, because there are other amp manufacturers out there who charge significantly more, and it makes my eyes water. But if you want this, which is not a clone of anything else, this is very much Rob's own take.
Yeah, it's a unique circuit in itself, as it is now.
Yeah, and the quietness is impressive. The way that it sings on those lead lines, that's worth its weight in gold to me. So yeah, if you're interested, Rob's contact details for the website are down in the description below, and so get in contact, give him a call, have a chat. And I will be making more videos, hopefully, on this kind of stuff very soon. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks to Henning for switching. If he actually switched at all, I can't tell because I can't see.
I think.
Wait, what?
And
I just woke up.
Yes, okay. Thanks to Mike from CGS for putting on this amazing event, and Lewis as well. Thanks to everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. Hey, everyone. That might be the end of the video, but if you fancy carrying on this conversation, we have a Discord server, link is in the description. We're also on Patreon, which is something you can really help us with. We also are on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Hot Pole Studios. See you there.